For every woman who ever held the wound of a dangerous man and called it duty, this one is for you. The rain came down hard that night, the kind of rain that didn't just fall but attacked, slashing sideways off the Hudson River and turning the streets of the Lower East Side into black mirrors. It was the sort of Tuesday in November that made people want to stay inside, drink something warm, and forget the world existed beyond their windows. Nadia Vasquez did not have that luxury. She was 11 minutes late to the start of her shift, which meant she was running, her sneakers hitting the slick pavement outside Bellevue Hospital Center with short, sharp slaps, her dark hair plastered to the sides of her face, her canvas bag pressed against her ribs like she could shield it from the downpour by sheer force of will. She had her badge around her neck, already, because she had learned long ago that fumbling for it at security when you were late only cost you another 3 minutes. Vasquez, the charge nurse, Donna, called out the moment she pushed through the double doors of the emergency wing, not even looking up from her clipboard. Trauma Bay 2, GSW. He came in 6 minutes ago. Dr. Hollis is already asking for you. I'm here, Nadia said, pulling her wet jacket off in one motion and tossing it over the back of the nurse's station chair. She was already tying her hair back, already moving toward the trauma bay. What's the vital situation? Not good. BP was 80/50 on arrival. He's lost a lot of blood. Single entry wound, right side, no exit. Bullet still in there. Donna finally looked up, and her expression was the particular combination of clinical and quietly concerned that Nadia had learned to read over 4 years of working alongside the woman. And Nadia, he came in alone. No one with him. No ID. Nadia pushed through the door. The man on the table was large. That was the first word her brain produced. Not tall exactly, though he was that too, because she could see the length of him overwhelming the standard issue gurney, his feet nearly at the edge, but large in the way that filled a room even when he was horizontal and barely conscious, the way that made the trauma bay feel somehow smaller than it had 5 minutes ago. His shirt, fine linen, the kind that cost more than her weekly paycheck, had been cut open by the paramedics, and his chest rose and fell in shallow, labored rhythms. He was olive-skinned, dark-haired, with the kind of jaw that looked like it had been constructed with architectural intention. Even now, with blood soaking through the paper beneath him and pain etching lines around his mouth, there was something in his face that was not afraid. Most GSW patients, in her experience, were afraid. Fear came in different forms, hyperventilating, crying, clutching at hands, but it was almost always present. This man looked like he was merely inconvenienced. His eyes were closed, but as she moved to his right side and Dr. Hollis rattled off the situation, single gunshot wound to the right flank, bullet lodged near the kidney, no immediate organ perforation visible on preliminary scan, BP climbing back with fluids. Those eyes opened. Dark. So dark they appeared black in the fluorescent light. And they found her face immediately, with a directness that made her miss half a step. I need you to stay very still, she said, falling back on the professional cadence that was as automatic as breathing at this point. My name is Nadia. I'm your nurse tonight. We're going to take good care of you. Can you tell me your name? A pause. His jaw tightened. Marco, he said. His voice was low, accented. Italian, she thought, or something Mediterranean. The single word came out controlled, deliberate, as though even in this state he was choosing every syllable. Last name? Another pause, this one longer. Just Marco. She glanced at Dr. Hollis, who gave a minute shrug. It wasn't the first time. The Lower East Side ER did not ask questions it didn't need answered. Okay, Marco. Just Marco. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst pain you've ever felt. 4, he said. She looked at the wound. She looked at the monitor showing his vitals. She looked back at him. You're lying, she said, matter-of-factly. Something shifted in his expression. Not offense, more like surprise, and beneath that, something she might have called amusement if the context had been anywhere else. 5, he amended. We're going to start you on morphine, she said, already reaching for the IV line Donna had set on his left arm. You'll feel some warmth, no morphine. His voice sharpened, not loud, but absolute. The kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. I need to remain conscious. Dr. Hollis looked up. Sir, the pain level, no morphine. His eyes returned to Nadia. Something lighter, local if you must. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded because arguing with a patient who is capable of articulating a preference was not actually her call, not entirely. And because there was something in the way he said it that communicated clearly, this is not negotiable, and I have my reasons. Lidocaine and the mild sedative for the procedure, she said to Dr. Hollis. We can manage. Hollis gave her a look that said, you deal with him, which was frankly the look she got from most attending physicians when a patient was being difficult, and began prepping for the retrieval. She worked steadily through the next 2 hours. She was good at this. It was not vanity to know it, it was just fact. The way it was a fact that she was 5'4", and that she had grown up in the Bronx, and that she took her coffee black. She was good at this because she paid attention, because she had always paid attention, because attention was the thing her mother had drilled into her when she was 8 years old and sitting at the kitchen table while her mother explained, with the particular gravity of a woman who had survived real hardship, that no one was going to save you in this life except yourself, and that the only way to save yourself was to pay attention. She paid attention to Marco. She noticed the tattoo on the inside of his left wrist, small, precise, a symbol she didn't recognize. She noticed the quality of his watch, which was still on his wrist because she hadn't needed to remove it, and which was a make she knew was very expensive, because her last boyfriend had once pointed to one in a magazine and said something wistful. She noticed that he did not make a sound when the bullet was retrieved, not a single sound, though she saw the muscles in his jaw clench so hard she thought she heard his teeth grind. She noticed that he watched her. Not Dr. Hollis, not the walls, not the ceiling, the way most patients watched the ceiling when they were trying not to think about what was happening to their bodies. He watched her, consistently, with that dark and direct attention, as though she were a problem he was working through. It made her skin feel warm in a way she did not particularly welcome. You're going to need to stay off this for at least, Hollis began, when the procedure was done and the wound was closed and dressed. I'm aware, Marco said. We should admit you for observation. The kidney proximity, that won't be possible. Hollis looked at Nadia again with that your problem look. Nadia stepped in. Marco? She kept her voice level and professional, the way she did when she needed a patient to actually hear her rather than just listen. You lost a significant amount of blood, and the wound is deeper than a simple graze. If there is any internal bleed we missed, it could become life-threatening within hours. I understand you may have reasons for not wanting to stay. I'm not judging those reasons, but I need you to understand the risk you'd be taking. The room was quiet for a moment. She was aware of Hollis slipping out to deal with the 2 other patients waiting down the hall, the low murmur of the ER beyond the closed door, the rain still audible even through the walls. Marco's eyes were on her face. Fully, completely, with a quality of focus that felt almost physical. I understand the risk, he said quietly. Then you understand that I can't in good conscience. You've done your job admirably, he said, still quiet. Better than admirably. The risk is mine to carry. She stood there for a moment, the clipboard with his non-existent chart in her hands, and looked at him. He looked back. A man who had just had a bullet removed from his flank without adequate pain management, who was pale beneath his tan and whose blood pressure was still lower than she would have liked, who looked at her as though he were entirely in control of this situation. I need you to sign a release, she said. Of course. She got the form. He signed it, quickly, with the physician's neatness, which she noticed, and by the time she went to retrieve the discharge instructions a nurse's aide had been beckoning her toward for the past 5 minutes, she had turned to find the curtain open, the gurney empty, and Marco gone. Just gone. Into the New York night, into the rain, into whatever world he had come from. She stood there for a moment with the discharge papers still in her hand. Then she went back to work, because there were 4 other patients waiting, because the night was young in the way only hospital nights were young, and because she had not survived 4 years of night shifts at Bellevue by standing still and wondering about men who disappeared. Still. She thought about his eyes for a very long time. The building on Park Avenue did not look like the seat of an empire. That was intentional. It was all clean glass and tasteful steel, the kind of architecture that communicated success in the particular New York dialect of old money pretending not to show off. A wealth management firm occupied floors 3 through 9, a law practice held 11, and a private equity group took 12 and 13. None of them were aware that floors 15 through 20 belonged, in all the ways that actually mattered, to a man named Marco Vitelli, not in any legal documentation. Marco Vitelli did not appear on any lease, any corporate filing, any tax record that connected him to this building or the dozen others across the city where his interests breathed. He was fastidious about that. It was a kind of discipline, the same discipline that had governed his entire adult life, the conviction that power, real power, was invisible. He arrived at the building at 3:47 in the morning, which was 40 minutes after leaving Bellevue Hospital Center, which meant he had taken a route that was not direct. Old habit. You never went straight from a wound to your door. Constantine was waiting in the elevator lobby on 15, tall, Nordic, with the particular blankness of expression that characterized men who had spent too long in proximity to violence. He took one look at Marco's side, where the hospital dressing was visible beneath the new shirt that Marco had retrieved from the car, and his jaw set. "How bad?" he said. "Managed." Marco stepped past him toward the main corridor. "Get me Sarto." "It's almost 4 in the morning." "I'm aware of the time, Constantine." The main level of the 15th floor was not what most people would have expected from a criminal enterprise, though Marco had long since stopped using that phrase, even in his own thinking. Enterprise was accurate. Criminal was a matter of perspective, or more precisely, a matter of who was writing the law and who was paying the people who wrote it. The space was open, dark now except for the ambient glow of the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows, furnished with the kind of spare elegance that reflected Marco's particular aesthetic. No excess, everything with a purpose. He sat at the long obsidian table in the war room, though he called it the conference room, another form of deliberate camouflage. And by the time Sarto arrived, 19 minutes later, breathless and buttoning his jacket over a shirt he'd clearly thrown on in a hurry, Marco had already assembled a working theory. Angelo Sarto was 41, Calabrian, and had been Marco's second-in-command for 7 years. He was also the only person in Marco's organization who spoke to him with something approaching frankness. "The Brancusi crew," Sarto said, without preamble, setting his phone on the table. "The word is already out. They're claiming it." "Of course they are." Marco's voice was flat. "They've been waiting for an opening since the docks arrangement fell through in September. They thought you'd be dead." They were poorly informed. Sarto sat down, studied his boss with the practiced eye of a man who had seen Marco in worse situations and knew better than to make it about concern. "The girl at the hospital, the nurse, she's a loose end." Marco was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. Sarto waited. "She is not a loose end," Marco said. "She kept me alive. That's a debt. She saw your face. She has your blood on her hands. Literally. If the Brancusi people trace the Brancusi people are not sophisticated enough to trace a hospital visit before I clean up the trail, which will be done by morning." Marco's voice carried no heat. It didn't need to. "The nurse is not a loose end. She is a debt, and I pay my debts." Sarto looked at him for a long moment. He had the wisdom not to push it further. They talked for 2 hours, about the Brancusi response, about the dock situation, about 3 other moving pieces that had needed Marco's attention even before someone put a bullet in him on West 14th Street. Marco moved through it all with the same quality of focus he brought to everything. Complete, precise, unhurried. If the pain in his side was present, and it was, a deep, insistent burn that the lidocaine was long past managing, he did not show it. But somewhere in the back of his mind, beneath all the strategy and calculation, a face persisted. Dark hair, wet with rain. Brown eyes that hadn't flinched when they told him he was lying. A voice that was professional and steady and, underneath it all, something that was simply and quietly real. Not performing competence, not working up to it, but simply being it. "You're lying," she had said. No one said that to him. He found he couldn't quite stop thinking about it. 6 weeks passed. Nadia forgot about him, mostly. This was not difficult. The emergency room had a way of rendering everything that happened in it simultaneously vivid and disposable. Each patient urgent and consuming in the moment, receding the instant the next crisis arrived. She had worked 12 nights since the night of the unnamed man with the bullet, and each of those nights had brought its own catastrophes, its own moments of held breath, its own strange human dramas that collapsed and resolved and were replaced. She thought about his eyes maybe twice. She told herself this was fine. Her life outside the hospital was, if she was being honest with herself, in the way she preferred not to be while standing in the dairy aisle of the Associated on 2nd Avenue at 7:45 in the morning. A little threadbare. Not unhappy. She was careful to distinguish between those two things, because she had grown up watching people conflate them and make terrible decisions as a result. She had her apartment, small and on the 4th floor of a walk-up on East 28th Street, which she had furnished gradually over 3 years with things she actually liked. A blue couch that took up most of the living room, shelves of books organized by color because she had given herself permission to be shallow about one thing. A small collection of plants that were, despite her best efforts, mostly not dying. She had her best friend Priya, who was a hospitalist on the day shift, and who texted her at least 40 times a day, despite the fact that they worked in the same building. She had her neighbor, Mr. Okonkwo, on the 3rd floor, who brought her jollof rice on the first Sunday of every month, and asked after her mother with the particular gentleness of someone who had known her since she moved in. She had a savings account she was building towards something she hadn't fully defined yet, the idea of which was comforting even without a specific shape. She did not have a functioning radiator in her bedroom, which in November in New York was a problem of the first order. She had called the building super, Ramon, 4 times about it. Ramon had come twice, looked at it with the expression of a man performing concern without actually experiencing it, and done nothing that had any discernible effect. The bedroom was cold enough that she slept in 2 layers and a hat, which she had mentioned to Priya in a text mostly meant to be funny, and which Priya had responded to with 18 separate crying laughing emojis, and then, separately, the message, "Babe, you have to stop letting people walk all over you." She was thinking about this, the radiator, as she walked home from the Associated with $37 worth of groceries, because the cold had been particularly aggressive this morning, and she had nearly slipped on a patch of ice on the front steps of her building, which had reminded her that winter was actually here now, and she needed the radiator to work before she froze to death in her own apartment. She was so focused on this, on the logistics of yet another call to Ramon, versus the option of buying a space heater at the CVS up the block, that she didn't notice the car until she was almost at her building's front door. It was parked directly in front, a car that did not belong on East 28th Street. Not because it was ostentatious exactly, but because it was the kind of quiet, polished thing that communicated expense without trying to, the way certain people communicated authority without raising their voice. Black, immaculate, with a driver visible through the windshield who was looking straight ahead with the professionally blank expression of a man paid to wait. She noticed the car. She noted it as not belonging and kept walking toward her door. "Ms. Vasquez." She stopped. The voice came from her left, from a man she didn't recognize who had apparently been standing near the steps, which she had not noticed, which was the kind of lapse in attention that her mother would have been very unhappy about. He was broad-shouldered, pale, wearing a coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and looking at her with a polite expression that somehow communicated absolute certainty. "I have no information on how you know my name," she said, "but I'm going to tell you right now that I have mace in my pocket and I will absolutely use it." Something flickered in the man's expression. Almost amusement, not quite. "I understand your caution," he said. His accent was European, Eastern European. "I work for a man you helped recently." He wanted to express his gratitude. She stared at him. "The man from the hospital," she said. "He'd like to speak with you." "Then he can call the hospital's general line and ask for the nursing director's office, and submit a formal—" "Ms. Vasquez." The man's voice was still polite, utterly composed. "He is in the car." She looked at the black car. She looked back at the man. She looked at her building's front door, 3 steps away, and at the buzzer that would get her into the lobby, and up to the 4th floor, and into the apartment, where she could lock the door and not deal with any of this. She was a sensible woman. She had been sensible her whole life. She walked to the car. The back seat of the car was warmer than she expected, and darker, the windows tinted to a degree that made the morning light outside look like something from a photograph rather than real life. She settled into the seat and looked at the man beside her and felt, with some irritation, the same warmth across the back of her neck that she had felt 6 weeks ago in Trauma Bay 2. He looked better than he had then, considerably better. He was dressed in a dark suit of a cut she had no real vocabulary to describe except perfect, and his dark hair was pushed back from his face, and he was looking at her with those black eyes that held the same direct, unnerving quality she had noticed when he was lying on a gurney bleeding through a luxury linen shirt. He also looked, she noted, slightly uncomfortable, not in the way of a man who was uncertain, but in the way of a man in a situation he had prepared for intellectually, but that was, in practice, slightly different than anticipated. "You look better than the last time I saw you," she said. "You look exactly the same as the last time I saw you," he said. A pause. That is meant as a compliment. "I was coming off a 12-hour night shift and soaking wet." "Yes." She stared at him. He returned the stare with perfect equanimity. "Your man said you wanted to express gratitude," she said. "I do." "You don't need to. I was doing my job." "I'm aware that you were doing your job." His voice was measured, even. "The gratitude is nonetheless real. You kept me alive, Ms. Vasquez." "Nadia." Something shifted in his expression. Small, quick, but she caught it. "Nadia." The way he said it, with a slight continental roll on the second syllable, like the name was something he was tasting, made her want to look at something other than his face. She looked at her hands instead. "I don't need anything from you," she said. "I know that." He said it without offense, with the same quality of simple, factual statement. "That is, in fact, part of why I'm here. I owe you a debt, and I would like to repay it. On your terms." "That's a very elaborate way of saying you want to give me money." "Not necessarily money." He watched her. "What do you need?" The question was so direct, so simple, so completely without preamble, that she almost laughed. She stopped herself, because she was in the back of a very expensive car, next to a man who was certainly not what he was presenting himself as. A man whose silence on his own name and the circumstances of his injury communicated things she had chosen not to examine too closely, and was making the same choice about now. "My radiator is broken," she said, because it was the thing that was on her mind, and because some part of her wanted to see what he would do with that. He looked at her for a moment. "Your radiator," he repeated. "In my bedroom. It's been broken for 6 weeks. My super won't fix it." "Your super's name and the address of your building," he said. "I am absolutely not giving you that information." "Then give me your building address. I'll find the rest." She looked at him. He looked back. "I live in this building," she said, because she had already gotten in the car, which had already told him approximately as much as her building address would have. She watched the minute calculation happen behind his eyes. "I'll have it repaired today," he said. "Today is today." She sat with that for a moment. The morning traffic moved outside the tinted windows, unhurried and unaware. A woman walked past on the sidewalk with a coffee and a child, and the compact, determined expression of someone getting through a Tuesday. "Marco," she said. It was the first time she had used his name since the hospital, and it felt different outside the clinical context, more personal, though she hadn't meant it to be. He looked at her. "Who are you?" she asked. "Actually." The pause was brief and precise. "A man who pays his debts," he said. "That's not an answer. It's the answer I can give you." She should have left it there. She knew, in the particular bone-deep way that made her good at her job, when a line was being drawn. She had drawn enough lines herself to recognize the architecture. "The bullet wound," she said. "Someone shot you." "Yes." "Intentionally." He looked at her with something that was not quite patience and not quite amusement. Bullets rarely arrive accidentally. "Are you in danger?" The question surprised him. She could see it, the smallest break in that composed exterior, like a crack running through something that had been built specifically not to crack. He looked at her as though she had asked something unexpected, as though the concern embedded in the question had not been part of his calculation for this conversation. No more than usual, he said. She exhaled. She reached for the door handle because she had groceries to put away and sleep to get before her shift tonight, and because all of this was, beyond the edge of anything that could be described as a good idea. The radiator, he said. She stopped. I'll send someone this afternoon. You don't need to be there. Will you allow that? She turned back to look at him. This man with his impossible eyes, and his one-word name, and his bullet wound, and his black car, and his complete, infuriating certainty. Yes, she said. She got out of the car, walked up the steps, on the right side now, away from the ice, and did not look back. She was fairly certain he watched her go anyway. She was more than fairly certain she was going to regret this. The radiator was fixed at 2 p.m. She knew this because Mr. Okonkwo texted her. 2 very large men came to fix your heat. Very polite. Are you okay? She texted back. I am fine, thank you, Mr. O. They were sent by a friend. She lay in her bed that night before her shift, in the warm bedroom that had been cold for 6 weeks, and stared at the ceiling and thought about what friend meant, and decided that was a conversation she was not having with herself at this hour. 3 days later, a package arrived at the nurse's station, addressed to her. No return address, a Manhattan zip code on the label. Inside was a very good bottle of wine, a small card in dark ink that read simply, "For a job done well, M." And a second, smaller box that contained, to her considerable bafflement, a set of extremely high-quality hand cream. She stood at the nurse's station holding the hand cream, reading the label, while Priya leaned over her shoulder. Hand cream, Priya said. Hand cream, Nadia confirmed. Who sends hand cream? Apparently M does. M. Priya plucked the card out of her fingers and read it with the avidity of someone who had been waiting for something interesting to happen to her best friend for some time. Who is M? This is a very good card. This card is made of actual nice paper. Feel this paper. I feel the paper. This is a man who owns a letter opener. This is a monogram on everything, man. This is... Priya stopped, looked at her with the expression she got when a diagnosis suddenly crystallized. Nadia, who is this? A patient, Nadia said, taking the card back. You don't give your patients your name. They had it from other sources. That is concerning. I know. And also, Priya said, picking up the wine and reading the label with the focused interest of someone who knew wine, which she did, this bottle is almost $300. Nadia took the wine back as well. Priya watched her with a combination of delight and genuine concern that was very Priya. You like him, Priya said. I don't know him. You like him. He was shot in my trauma bay 6 weeks ago, and I saved his life, and now he is apparently very grateful. She put the wine carefully back in the box. It's not a thing. Hand cream, Priya said, with great significance. I have to check on bed 4. He noticed your hands, Priya called after her. He was lying on a table bleeding, and he noticed your hands, and 6 weeks later he sent you... Priya. She went to check on bed 4. She thought about his eyes through the rest of her shift, which meant she thought about them for approximately 9 hours, and this was deeply inconvenient. On Saturday, she was on her way to the farmer's market on Union Square. It was a thing she did when she worked enough days to feel like she deserved something that wasn't functional. When her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. She answered. Nadia? His voice unhurried and low, as though 3 weeks and a phone call were the most natural progression in the world. She stopped walking, which caused the woman behind her to make an irritated sound and navigate around her on the crowded sidewalk. How did you get this number? She said. I have resources. That's not... She started moving again, slower. That's not a comforting answer. I know. A brief pause. Are you well? It was such a formal question, weirdly courtly, and it undid something in her that she had been carefully maintaining. I'm fine, she said. Are you? Your wound. Healed. It hasn't been quite long enough to be fully... Nadia. Her name again, with that particular cadence. I am fine. She stopped at a crosswalk. The light was red. The city moved around her in its Saturday afternoon way, louder and more chaotic than weekday mornings. People carrying canvas bags and coffee cups, and the particular energy of people who had 2 days off and intended to feel every minute of them. The hand cream was very good, she said, because she had decided she was not going to pretend she didn't know what she thought about it. Another of those small silences that she was beginning to understand carried weight with him. The pauses were not empty, they were how he processed. Your hands work hard, he said. That's... She wasn't sure what it was, exactly. Too simple to be called flattery, and too specific to be called generic. Thank you, she said. I'd like to see you, he said, if that is acceptable to you. The light turned green. She walked. You understand that I don't know who you are, she said, and that who you are is, from what I can infer, not simple. That is accurate. And you're asking me to have dinner with you anyway. Yes. She walked for half a block in silence. The farmer's market was 2 blocks away, and she could already smell something roasting on a nearby stand, apples and cinnamon, the particular alchemy of November. Thursday, she said. I'm off Thursday. The restaurant had no sign. This was the first thing she noticed. No sign, no visible menu, no indication from the outside of the building on East 62nd Street that there was anything inside worth entering. Just a dark door and a man in a very good suit standing outside it, who opened that door the moment she arrived, as though he had been informed of her arrival down to the minute. Which, she reflected, he probably had been. Inside was quiet, in the particular way that very expensive places were quiet, as though the noise of the city had been gently but firmly excluded. Candles on dark tables, low music she couldn't quite identify, the smell of something extraordinary coming from somewhere behind a set of heavy curtains. She was shown to a table in the back, not secluded exactly, but set apart, giving a view of the rest of the restaurant without being easily viewed in return. Marco was already there. He stood when she arrived. She noticed this, the automatic, old-world courtesy of it, and he was wearing a dark jacket that did very specific things to the width of his shoulders that she decided to file under irrelevant, do not examine. He looked, in this setting, like exactly what he was, which was to say, a man of extraordinary composure and very mysterious money, which was not a thing she should find attractive, and which she found extremely attractive, which was the problem. You look beautiful, he said, as she sat. She had worn a dark green dress that she had bought on sale 2 years ago, and almost never wore because she had almost nowhere to wear it. She had spent longer than she cared to admit deciding whether to wear it tonight. Thank you, she said. You look like a person who has never been to a restaurant that has a sign. Something happened in his eyes, a brightness, quick and warm, that changed his whole face for just a moment, like light through a briefly opened door. This restaurant has many signs, he said. They are simply not visible to everyone. That feels metaphorical. Many things are. The dinner unfolded at a pace she hadn't experienced at a dinner table since. Possibly ever, she thought. Not fast and functional, the way she ate when she was tired, or performatively social, the way she ate with people she was trying to impress or be impressed by. It simply moved, like a tide. He asked her questions that surprised her by their specificity. Not, what do you do, he knew, or, where are you from? He had presumably found that out too. But smaller, more precise things. What made her become a nurse specifically, not in medicine generally, but night shift emergency specifically? Whether she had always lived in New York or had chosen it. What she read. She answered, and she watched him listen, and she understood that he was one of those rare people who listened the way she worked, completely, without planning the next thing to say while you were still talking, without performing attention. You grew up in the Bronx, he said. Not a question. Hunts Point, she said. You? A slight pause. Rome, originally, then various places. Various. It was an unusual childhood. She could have pressed. She didn't. And New York? I came here at 23, he said. I intended to stay 2 years. And? He looked at her. New York has a way of keeping people. She drank her wine. The wine was extraordinary, selected without the ostentatious performance some men deployed, simply indicated briefly to the sommelier with a two-word exchange, and looked at him. "What do you do, Marco?" she said. Not the generic question she'd used in the hospital. Genuinely. "I manage interests," he said. "Whose interests?" "Mine." A pause. "And those of people who are aligned with mine. And these interests are complex," he said. "Not always easily described." "Not always legal?" The pause that followed was not confirmatory, more like the pause of a man who was deciding whether to be honest and in what way. "I operate in spaces that the law draws lines around in ways I don't always agree with," he said. "I am not a violent man by nature, Nadia. I want you to understand that. What happened 6 weeks ago was an exception." "Someone tried to kill you," she said. "Yes, and that person has been dealt with." She sat with that. The restaurant's quiet pressed around them, candles guttering softly in the ventilation. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked, directly. No performance of not caring about the answer. She thought about it honestly. "No," she said. "I probably should be." "Possibly." His dark eyes held hers. "I am not a safe man." "You keep saying things like that." "Because they are true." "And yet you're here, telling me I look beautiful and ordering wine and asking me what I read." "Yes," he said, simply. "Why?" The question sat between them for a moment, the most honest thing she had said. "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the night you told me I was lying about my pain level," he said. "And I found that when I can't stop thinking about something, it is generally more productive to move toward it than away from it." She looked at him. He looked back. "That is," she said after a moment, "the most direct answer anyone has ever given me to that question." "I prefer directness." "I noticed." They had dessert, something dark and complex that she ate slowly, and he walked her to a cab afterward, which she had insisted on, despite his clear preference to have his driver take her. And he stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant that had no sign, and watched the cab pull away with an expression she caught through the rear window. Focused, intent, unreadable, and somehow, between all of that, deeply pleased. She thought about it on the way home. She thought about it in the elevator. She thought about it lying on her bed in the warm bedroom, staring at the ceiling. And what she thought was, this is either the beginning of something extraordinary or the beginning of something catastrophic. And I'm not entirely sure there's a difference. Marco Vitelli had been described, over the course of his 41 years, in many ways by many different people. Ruthless, precise, cold. His enemies used these words with contempt, and his subordinates used them with something between admiration and unease. And the few women who had occupied his life for significant time used them with a kind of resigned understanding, as though they had signed on for a particular type of experience and received exactly what they contracted for. He did not think of himself as cold. He thought of himself as edited. He had learned, very young, in the particular school that boys from certain Calabrian families attended, that emotion was not a problem in itself. Emotion was information. The problem was wearing it on the outside, where it could be seen and used. So he had learned to feel things in the interior of himself, where they sat and informed his decisions like instruments reading the weather, while his exterior remained readable only to those who had spent significant time studying it. Sarto had spent 7 years studying it. He could tell, therefore, by the way Marco reviewed the week's operational briefing the morning after the dinner on 62nd Street, that something had shifted. "The Fontana contract," Sarto said, sliding the folder across the table. Marco took it, opened it, and spent 40 seconds reading something that would normally have taken him 20. Sarto noted this. He said nothing. They worked through the morning. The Fontana thing, the dock situation which was still simmering, a request from the Marchetti family in Chicago that needed careful navigation, and it was not until early afternoon, when the office had emptied and Sarto was gathering his things to leave, that Marco said, without looking up from the report he was reading, "What do you know about a woman who works night shift at Bellevue Hospital Center?" Sarto stopped. "The nurse," he said. Marco looked up. "I had her looked into," Sarto said. His expression was carefully neutral. "After the hospital visit, for security purposes." "Tell me." "Nadia Vasquez." 29 years old, born in the Bronx. Mother is a retired school administrator, Marta Vasquez, currently living in Westchester. Father, absent from a young age, apparently not a story worth telling. Full scholarship to CUNY, nursing degree at Columbia, top of her graduating class. 4 years at Bellevue, night shift emergency. By all accounts, Sarto paused, choosing. Exemplary. No significant debt, no addictions, no security risks. No notable relationships in the past 2 years. Another pause. Quiet life. Works hard. Helps people. Marco was quiet for a moment. She had dinner with me last night, he said. Sarto absorbed this. I see. She asked me directly what I did. I was as honest as is wise. And she is not afraid of me. Marco said it with a quality that was difficult to categorize. Not satisfaction exactly. Something quieter and more complex. She should be, perhaps. She isn't. Marco. Sarto stopped himself, because 7 years had taught him the specific shape of the conversations that were worth having. Say it, Marco said. She is a woman who helps people for a living, who chose that life deliberately, by everything I can see. She works in the Bellevue ER on night shift. She didn't do that for the money. The money is not exceptional. She did it because she wants to be somewhere she can make a difference. Sarto's voice was careful, not unkind. She is not built for our world. No, Marco agreed, and you intend to bring her into it regardless. Marco looked at the window, at the November sky beyond the glass, at the city that he had spent 18 years learning and shaping in ways most of its inhabitants couldn't see. I intend to see her again, he said. What follows from that? I haven't decided. He decided, 4 days later, that he wanted to see her at least 3 more times. He had always been a man who moved by calculation, but calculation required information, and 3 more dinners would tell him more than Sarto's file ever could. He texted her. He had gotten her number, which she had not actually given him, and he included a note acknowledging this. I apologize for obtaining this without asking. If you prefer I don't use it, I won't. M. Her response came 40 minutes later. How do you even apologize properly for something like that? Actually impressed. Yes, you can text me. He read it 3 times. He was aware that he read it 3 times, and that this was not something he would have done 6 months ago, or 2 months ago, or, likely, 2 weeks ago. He texted back. Saturday evening, same place, if that suits you. Her response. Does the place have a name I can Google? His response. No. Her response. Of course it doesn't. Yes, Saturday works. He set the phone down and looked at the ceiling of the war room and permitted himself, very briefly, a thing that felt dangerously like happiness. Saturday became a pattern. Not every week. She had shifts, he had, whatever it was he had, the empire of invisible interests that she had decided, with the deliberate pragmatism that governed her life, to see as simply his work, the same way she did not ask her neighbor Mr. Okonkwo about the specific details of his import business, and he did not ask her about the specific details of her worst nights at the hospital. But often enough that by December she knew which table at the restaurant was his preferred table, and that he drank his espresso without sugar, and that the slight crease between his brows when something was concerning him was different from the crease when he was thinking through a problem, which was different from the one when something amused him. She knew other things too, things that arrived the way things did, in slow accumulation. That he had a sister in Rome, Julia, to whom he spoke every Sunday evening, and whose name, when mentioned, produced the only completely unguarded expression she had ever seen on his face. That he read voraciously, in 3 languages. That he had a particular dislike of dishonesty that bordered on physical. She had seen his jaw set and his eyes go flat when, at a restaurant adjacent to theirs one evening, she had overheard a man lying convincingly to a companion, and the expression on Marco's face had been something she needed a moment to understand. And she knew, she let herself know, because she was trying to be honest with herself even when it was inconvenient, that something was happening to her that she had not experienced before in quite this specific configuration. It was not purely physical attraction, though that was present, and she was not going to pretend otherwise. It was not novelty, the seduction of the dangerous unknown, because she had examined that possibility with clinical thoroughness and concluded that, while novelty was a component, it wasn't the engine. It was something more like recognition. The specific shock of finding, in a completely unexpected person, a quality you had been looking for without knowing you were looking for it. The quality of paying attention, of meaning what you said and saying what you meant and being, underneath all the complexity and the power and the danger, completely, stubbornly, remarkably real. She was thinking about this on a Tuesday in early December, on the subway coming home at 7 in the morning, when her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. "You need to be careful about the man you've been having dinner with. He is not safe." She read it twice, looked around the subway car as though the sender might be present, looked back at the message. She texted Marco. "Someone just sent me a warning about you from an unknown number. I'm passing it on because I think you should know." His response came in 42 seconds, which was the fastest she had ever received a text from him. "Where are you?" "Subway, Q train, heading uptown. Don't get off until 34th Street. Constantine will be there." She stared at the phone. The train hummed around her, other passengers scrolling phones and listening to music and doing the unseeing things people did on the subway at 7 in the morning. "Marco," she typed. "I'm fine. Tell me what's happening." A longer pause this time. "The people who shot me 6 weeks ago. They may be attempting a different angle of pressure. You need to be somewhere I can have eyes on." She sat with this for a moment. The train pulled into Lexington and 59th. "I have to go home and sleep before my shift tonight." "I know. Constantine will take you home and stay in the building." "He will stay in the building, not my apartment." "Yes, and this is temporary. Hopefully." A pause. "Nadia, I'm sorry." The apology landed differently than she expected. Not performative, not the strategic deployment of regret to manage her reaction. Just, "I'm sorry." Simple as the hand cream, simple as the way he stood when she arrived at the table, simple in the way that, she was beginning to understand, was actually not simple at all when it came from a man who spent his life performing complexity. "Don't apologize," she typed. "Just tell me it gets better." "It gets better," he wrote back. And then, after a moment, "I'll make sure of it." It snowed the first week of December in a way that felt dramatic even by New York standards. Heavy and sudden and blanketing, turning the city into something that looked briefly like a dream of itself. Nadia had always loved the first snow of the year, the specific hush of it, the way the city's relentless noise dimmed for a few hours into something almost peaceful. She was not, therefore, in the mood to be sitting in Marco Vitelli's car, going somewhere she hadn't consented to go, which was nonetheless what was happening. "I said I was fine with Constantine watching the building," she said. They were 20 blocks north of her apartment and heading further. "The building is not secure enough," Marco said. He was looking out the window and not at her, which she had learned meant he was genuinely concerned rather than performing concern. "The Brancusi people, the ones who sent that message, they have eyes in your neighborhood now. I had confirmation this morning." "So your solution is to bring you somewhere they don't have eyes?" "And that somewhere is—" "My residence," he said, still not looking at her. "Temporarily." She looked at him for a long moment. The city moved past the windows, white and blurred, the snow still coming down. "Marco," she said. He turned to look at her. "You understand that you cannot just move people," she said, "like chess pieces." "I understand that," he said. "I also understand that if I leave you in that apartment and something happens to you because I underestimated how quickly the Brancusi situation would escalate." He stopped. Something moved in his jaw. "That is not acceptable to me." "What's not acceptable to you?" "Something happening to you," he said, quietly, precisely. "Because I was the one who brought you into this." She looked at him for a moment longer. The snow fell. The car moved. "I need to get my work things," she said. "I have a shift tomorrow night." "Constantine went to your apartment an hour ago. Your things are already there." She closed her eyes briefly. You had my apartment accessed. With your key, he said, which I had made when, several weeks ago. A pause. I'm aware that's alarming. Several weeks ago. She opened her eyes. Marco, you had a key to my apartment made several weeks ago. Yes. No attempt to minimize. No performance of sheepishness. Just, yes, I did that. Here are the facts. She breathed out. She looked at the snow on the window. We are having a very long conversation about boundaries, she said. I know. At some point in the very near future. Yes. But right now, she said, I'm too tired and there's too much snow and I am not doing it in the car. That's reasonable, he said. It's not reasonable. It's just what I'm choosing. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was not a cold silence. It was the silence of two people who had arrived at the edge of something and were taking a moment to look at it before stepping forward. The building had a doorman and a private elevator, and she refused to comment on any of it. The elevator opened directly into an apartment that occupied the entire top floor of the building. Penthouse was the obvious word, though it felt inadequate because it evoked things like celebrity excess and mirrored surfaces, and this was not that. This was a space that looked like Marco himself, spare and precise and expensive without performing its expense, with the same quality of everything with a purpose that his office apparently had. The ceilings were very high, the windows were very large, and beyond them, New York lay white and thick with snow, the city spread out like a circuit board someone had draped in gauze. She stood at the window for a long moment. It's beautiful, she said. Yes, he said. He was behind her, and she was fairly certain he was not looking at the snow. She turned. He was, in fact, looking at her. The apartment was warm. The snow was outside. He was 6 feet away from her, with his jacket off now. The sleeves of his dark shirt rolled to his forearms, and he looked, she thought, helplessly, like someone had painted him. The conversation about boundaries, she said. We can have it now, he said. I know you want to keep me safe, she said. I understand that. I appreciate it, even when it's enraging. She paused. But you can't make decisions for me. You can make them with me, or you can present information and let me decide. But you cannot just arrange my life around your choices without my knowledge. Do you understand that? He looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said. I understand it intellectually. I find it difficult in practice. Why? Because when something matters to me, I am accustomed to controlling the variables around it, he said. It's how I've operated for 18 years. I am not a variable, she said. No, he said. You are not. A pause. And in that pause, something shifted. Something that had been restrained, held back by the sheer force of his characteristic composure, moved closer to the surface. You are the least variable thing in my life at the moment, which is both entirely new and completely terrifying. She stood looking at him. Good, she said, quietly. He crossed the room in 3 steps and kissed her, and she let him, and the snow fell on the city below the enormous windows, and neither of them spoke again for a long time. She woke to the sound of the city, subdued, still snow-muffled, the particular quiet of a New York morning after a heavy snowfall, and to the smell of coffee, which was inexplicable since she was in someone else's apartment and expected to be disoriented. She was not precisely disoriented. She knew where she was. She lay in the enormous bed in the room Marco had shown her to. A guest room, he had said, with a formality that she had found both endearing and slightly absurd, given that they had kissed for 20 minutes in the living room before she had finally said she needed to actually sleep before her shift, and let the morning unfold around her slowly. The room was beautiful in daylight, the winter light coming off the snow and filling it with that particular diffuse silver glow. She could hear, faintly, from elsewhere in the apartment, low voices, the muted sound of a call, the distant movement of someone doing the things that business people did even before 8 in the morning. She used the bathroom, brushed her teeth with a toothbrush still in its packaging that had been placed on the counter with the same silent forethought that was beginning to feel like Marco's dialect of care, and went to find the source of the coffee. The kitchen was, she paused in the doorway, extraordinary. Not showy, just generous. Enormous windows, marble counters, and at the center of it, Marco, in gray trousers and a white shirt that was untucked, his dark hair slightly unstructured, leaning against the counter, reading something on his phone with a cup in his hand. He looked up. The look on his face when he saw her, just for a moment, before he collected himself into that composed exterior again, was the most undefended thing she had ever seen from him. Pure and simple and warm, the specific expression of someone who has something good and knows it, and it hit her somewhere between her sternum and her stomach. "Coffee," he said. "Yes," she said, "please." He poured. She sat on a high stool at the counter and wrapped both hands around the cup, and they existed in the kitchen together in the morning quiet, and it was ordinary. Startlingly, improbably ordinary. The kind of ordinary that felt, paradoxically, like something extraordinarily rare. "I have to call my mother," she said. "She'll have texted." "Your mother texts?" "My mother is very evolved." She was already reaching for her phone. "She also likes to know where I am when there's a big snowstorm." "What will you tell her?" "That I'm at a friend's?" She met his eyes over the phone screen. "That's what you are, isn't it? Among other things." Something flickered in his expression. "Yes," he said, "among other things." She called her mother, Marta Vasquez, who lived in Westchester and read 3 newspapers a day and had specific opinions about everything, took about 30 seconds to perceive that something was different about her daughter's voice, another 30 seconds to determine that it had to do with a man, and approximately 2 minutes to extract, without asking directly, the information that this man was neither a coworker nor anyone her daughter had mentioned before. "Be careful, mija," her mother said, in the tone she used when she meant multiple things at once. "I'm always careful," Nadia said. "You are sometimes too careful," her mother said, "and sometimes not careful enough, and the difficulty is that you do not always know which one you are doing." After she hung up, Marco was looking at her from across the kitchen. "She told you to be careful," he said, not a question. "How could you possibly—" "The way you said I'm always careful at the end." A small pause. "Does she know about who I am?" "She knows I'm at a friend's, who has a very nice apartment," Nadia said. "That's as far as it goes today." He nodded. He looked out the window, at the white city below. "My sister," he said, slowly, in the way he had of beginning sentences that were going somewhere new. "Julia, when she found out who I had become, what I had built, she asked me one question." Nadia waited. "She asked me if I was happy." He was quiet for a moment. "I told her I was satisfied, that I had accomplished what I intended to accomplish, that I was managing. And she said that managing was not happiness, and that I should try, sometime, to know the difference." Nadia sat with her coffee in her hands and looked at this man who ran a criminal empire from a Park Avenue office and had a key made to her apartment and kissed her in the snowlight the night before, and thought about the difference between satisfaction and happiness, and about how clearly some people saw things when they weren't the ones standing inside them. "Smart woman," she said. "She's 26 and she paints," he said. "She has always understood things I've had to think my way toward." "Is she happy, Julia?" He smiled, a real one, the kind that used his eyes. "Unbearably," he said. She laughed. It surprised her slightly, the laugh, how easily it arrived, and she watched his face when she laughed and saw the same expression she'd caught in the doorway, that brief, undefended warmth, and understood that she was in serious trouble. The good kind, maybe, the kind worth being in. The situation with the Brancusi organization resolved, in Marco's way of resolving things, quickly and completely and without much noise. Sarto reported the outcome to her, of all people, because Marco was on a call when she happened to be in the conference room, and Sarto appeared to have made the calculation that she was now a person who warranted being informed. "You can go home," he said, delivering it like a memo. "That's—" She looked up from the book she was reading. "Actually, that's the best news I've heard all week." "The situation has been addressed," Sarto said, with his characteristic economy of expression. Then, after a pause that seemed almost reluctant, Marco dealt with it personally. He wanted it concluded quickly. She understood, without Sarto spelling it out, that dealt with it personally was a sentence she should not pull at. The way you learned not to pull at certain seams in certain garments because the whole thing would unravel. This was the architecture of the life she was choosing to walk alongside, and she had decided, in the deliberate, honest way she made most of her important decisions, that she was making that choice with open eyes. She went home. Her apartment was exactly as Constantine had left it, which was to say, exactly as she had left it before the snow, except that the refrigerator had been restocked. She chose not to address this with Marco. She was picking her battles. What she did address, on the Thursday when they had dinner, at the restaurant, restored to routine, back in the corner table with the candles and the extraordinary wine, was the question she had been carrying for 2 weeks. What happens, she said, if we become something more than... She paused, trying to find the word that was accurate without being clinical. More than dinners, he said. More than dinners. He looked at her across the table with that focused attention, in the candlelight that made the angles of his face something a painter would have wanted to study. Then you would be in my life, he said, more fully than you are now, which means... He stopped, and she watched the discipline of it, the way he was choosing to say the true thing rather than the reassuring thing. Which means that some of what I carry, you would carry too. Not directly. I would protect you from the direct of it, always, but the weight of who I am, what I do, that would be present. I know that, she said. I want to make sure you know it fully. Marco, she put down her glass. I am a woman who chose to work in an emergency room on night shift. I have held people while they were dying. I have held people while they were deciding whether to live. I understand the weight of things. A pause. I am not naive about you. I'm not pretending you're something you're not. I'm asking what the shape of this would be. He was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the restaurant did its quiet, expensive work. I don't share well, he said. The honesty of it was almost startling. I will tell you plainly, possessive by nature. I'm aware that it's not a virtue. I am working on the difference between possessiveness and protectiveness, but I won't pretend the distinction is always clean in how I feel about it. What does that mean in practice? It means that the thought of you in danger produces in me a response that is not entirely rational. A pause. And the thought of someone else, wanting what I want, his jaw tightened slightly. I don't manage that with particular grace. She looked at him. He looked back, not embarrassed, just honest. I appreciate the warning, she said. It's not a warning, he said. It's a declaration of what I am, so you can decide with full information. She reached across the table and touched his hand, brief, deliberate. He stilled, completely, like a man who has been startled by something gentle, which she thought said more than almost anything else she had learned about him. Full information, she said, includes, I'm not interested in anyone else, and I don't need you to be someone you aren't. I need you to try. There's a difference. He turned his hand under hers. His thumb ran across her knuckles. I know the difference, he said, quietly. Good. She pulled her hand back, picked up her wine, and smiled at him. Now order something else. I've been eyeing the risotto on that other table for 10 minutes. The sound he made was low and brief and entirely human, and she decided on the spot that making Marco Vitelli laugh was going to be something she intended to do as frequently as possible. Christmas came, and with it, the particular social machinery of Marco's world, which he had not, apparently, anticipated needing to navigate with her presence in his life. There was a dinner, the kind of dinner that was described in Marco's precise way as a gathering of associates and their families, which translated, in practice, into 26 people in the private dining room of a hotel on Park Avenue, most of whom were men who moved through the world with the particular gravity of people who were accustomed to not being questioned, accompanied by women who were uniformly beautiful and very well dressed, and who assessed Nadia from the moment Marco's hand settled at the small of her back, with a precision that she recognized as both territorial and appreciative, the way professionals assessed other professionals. She was wearing a black dress that Priya had made her buy, specifically for an occasion she had been promised was coming, and her hair was up, and she was aware that she looked fine, good even, but also aware that fine and good were doing specific work in a room where most of the women had been styled by someone whose name she didn't know. She was also aware that Marco had not taken his hand from her back since they walked in. There was a man, mid-40s, dark hair going silver, broad-shouldered, with the smile of someone who had decided charm was an asset and invested heavily in it, who was introduced as Luca Cannavaro, an associate from Boston, and who shook her hand and held it slightly too long, and directed at her a smile that was frankly too warm for a first meeting. She felt, before she could see it, the quality of stillness that came over Marco beside her. "You're the nurse," Cannavaro said. His English was fluent, American accented. "Marco's mentioned you." "Has he?" She extracted her hand with a degree of grace she was mildly proud of. "Entirely in favorable terms," Cannavaro said. His smile widened. "He's a man of few words, so any terms represent—" "Luca." Marco's voice was even, perfectly even, the kind of even that was doing very significant structural work. Cannavaro looked at Marco. Something passed between them, a communication Nadia couldn't entirely read, and Cannavaro's smile adjusted slightly. "Good to meet you," he said to her, and moved away. She waited until they were standing near the windows with their drinks, before she turned to Marco. He was being inappropriate, Marco said. "He was being friendly," she said. "Aggressively friendly. There is a difference." Marco looked at her. The jaw set was present. "I know the difference," he said. "He was not being friendly." "And if he were?" She kept her voice gentle, careful. This was the territory he had warned her about. "Then I would still prefer he wasn't," Marco said. There was something almost self-aware about it, a man catching himself in the exact thing he had warned her about. "I'm aware that's not a rational position." "It's not entirely irrational," she said. "But I need you to trust me, not just claim me." The words landed visibly. She watched him process them. "Trust you how?" he said. "Trust that I'm here because I choose to be." She looked at him steadily. "Not because I'm being held here by your hand on my back. I am not going to wander off with Luca Cannavaro, Marco. I came here with you. That was a choice. Let it be a choice." A long pause. Around them, the dinner conversation hummed, silver on crystal, the Christmas lights in the windows throwing everything gold. He moved his hand from her back. She looked at him. He offered her his arm. Different gesture, deliberate change, the shift from claiming to asking. She understood the difference immediately. She took his arm. "Good," she said. The rest of the evening was better. Not perfect, because he watched Cannavaro the way people watched things that represented a specific category of risk, but controlled, disciplined, the way he was at his best, all that intensity contained and directed. He introduced her, properly, as someone he wanted people to meet, her name, her work, no euphemism or diminishment. She was not a friend. She was simply Nadia, with the particular weight his voice put on it that communicated more than a title could. On the way home, in the car through the Christmas-lit city, she leaned her head against his shoulder because she was tired and because she wanted to. His arm came around her. Not possessive, just present. "Julia would like you," he said. She looked up. "Has she said that?" "I described you to her," he said. She said, a slight pause, and the expression that came with his sister's name. "She said I'd finally found someone who would tell me the truth." "She sounds wonderful," Nadia said. "She is insufferable," he said. "She is also wonderful." A pause. "You would get along badly." "Why badly?" "Because you are both right about everything, and neither of you would concede a single point, and I would be caught in the middle." She laughed. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, and the city went by in its winter illumination, and she thought about truth-telling and trust and the small, hard, daily work of choosing someone, and thought it was the best work there was. January was when she found out. She had known, she had always known, in the way you know things you are not fully looking at, that Marco was more than what he'd described, with complex interests and spaces the law draws lines around. She had known, and she had made her peace with the knowing, and kept it in the particular internal drawer where she kept the things that were true but not useful to dwell on. January was when she opened the drawer. It was not dramatic, the way you might have expected. There was no confrontation, no revelation scene, no stack of evidence accidentally discovered. It was, in the end, a name. She was in the penthouse. She had been spending, with increasing frequency, evenings and occasionally nights there, the guest room's use having evolved in ways that felt both inevitable and significant. And Marco was on a call in his office, which she had been in twice and which was, like the rest of his spaces, stripped of anything unnecessary. She was reading in the living room. The call ran long. She made herself tea in the kitchen and, on her way back, passed the half-open door of the office, and she heard, through it, a name she recognized. Not Marco's name. A name from a news article she'd read, months ago, a long piece in the Times about organized crime investigations in New York, about a network of interests in the garment district and the docks, and 3 particular restaurants in the meatpacking district, and the name the article had circled and circled again, without quite landing on, hinting at, working toward. Vitelli. She stood in the hallway for a moment. Then she walked back to the living room and sat down with her tea and her book and stared at neither of them. He came out 20 minutes later. He read her face in the way he did, completely, quickly, the way she read vital signs. He stood in the doorway of the living room. "You heard something," he said. "I heard a name," she said. "The name from a Times article, 8 months ago, that I read about organized crime investigations in—" "Yes," he said. One word, no deflection. She put down her book. She looked at him. "Tell me," she said. He sat down, not across from her, beside her, on the blue couch that didn't really belong in this penthouse, but that she had refused to leave behind when she'd started spending time here, and which he had never once complained about. He sat beside her and looked at his hands for a moment, and then at her. And he told her. Not everything. She understood that everything was not a gift he could give her without consequences for both of them, and she didn't ask for everything. But enough. The structure of it, the geography of it, how it had begun in the aftermath of his father's death when he was 23 and already in Rome, learning the shape of a world that required participants, not spectators. How it had grown in New York, what he controlled in broad terms, and what that meant. The people who served him, and the people who were aligned with him, and the people who were, periodically, not. She listened without interrupting, which took some doing. When he finished, the apartment was very quiet. "The man who shot you," she said. "The Brancusi situation. That was a power play. Someone challenging your position." "Yes. And you dealt with it personally." A pause. "Yes. What does that mean, specifically?" He looked at her. The question was a line, and they both knew it, and he was deciding whether to cross it or hold it. "It means it was handled," he said. "It means they will not be coming for you or for me again. The specific mechanics—" "I'm not asking for the specific mechanics," she said. Her voice was steady. She was working very hard to keep it steady, because there was something happening in her chest that was both fear and grief and something else she couldn't name, and none of it was helping. "I'm asking, I need to understand what I'm with, clearly, without the architecture of not looking." He was quiet for a long moment. "You are with a man who has done things he is not proud of, in the service of building something that is—" He stopped, started again. "I am not a good man in the way your patients expect good men to be, Nadia. I have never claimed otherwise. I have people who depend on me, a structure that exists because I built it, and I protect it with whatever is required. That has, yes, included violence. I will not lie to you about it." She sat with this. The honesty of it was the most frightening thing he could have given her, and also, she recognized, the only thing she could have actually lived with. "I need some time," she said. "Of course. I need to go home tonight." "Yes." She stood. She gathered her things, not in haste, not in anger, in the deliberate way she did difficult things. At the door, she stopped. "Marco," she turned. "The night I met you, in the trauma bay." He looked at her. "You could have died," she said. "If I'd been on break when they brought you in, if Dr. Hollis hadn't been 3 minutes away, if the bullet had been half an inch—" She stopped, breathed. "I don't know what to do with the fact that I care about what happens to you, even with all of this." He was very still. "That's not a problem," she said. "That's just, What's true? She left. She took 4 days. He did not contact her. Not a text, not a call, not a driver appearing outside her building with some elaborate gesture of intervention. He simply waited. She understood, later, what this had cost him. The man who managed variables, who had a key made to her apartment, who had watched Luca Cannavaro hold her hand for 2 seconds with eyes that could have cut glass. He waited. She spent those 4 days in her apartment and at the hospital, and in a very long, very frank conversation with Priya that took place over 2 bottles of wine on Priya's couch, in the particular way that best friendship allowed for honesty that other relationships couldn't sustain. Okay, Priya said, when Nadia had finished telling her, the broad strokes, the things she could say without crossing lines that weren't hers to cross. Okay, this is a lot. I know. What we're describing is, I know. And you're not afraid. I'm not afraid, Nadia said, with the same honest certainty she'd expressed in his car 4 months ago. I'm troubled. There's a difference. Priya looked at her with the focused attention of someone doing a differential diagnosis. What do you feel when you think about walking away? Nadia was quiet for a moment. Like something would be wrong, she said. Not just that I'd be sad, like something would be factually incorrect. Priya nodded slowly. Yeah, she said. That's a thing. He didn't lie to me, Nadia said. Not once, not really. He withheld. There's a difference. And when I asked directly, he told me. He had a key made to your apartment. He also fixed my radiator. Those are not equivalent. No, Nadia said, but they're from the same place. The way he is, all of it, the control and the possessiveness and the keys and the radiators, it comes from the same place. He cares about the people in his circle in this very complete, very total way. It's not always comfortable, but it's real. Priya was quiet for a moment. Are you going back? She said. Nadia drank her wine. Yeah, she said. I am. Okay. Priya refilled both their glasses. Then we need to talk about what you actually need from him, specifically, not in the abstract. She texted him on the 5th day. Can we talk? His response came in 31 seconds. Whenever you're ready. Not, I've been waiting. Not, finally. Just, whenever you're ready. She sat with this for a moment and thought about how consistently, how remarkably, this man chose the right word. They met at the penthouse. Not the restaurant. She wanted his space, his ground, because this was a conversation that mattered, and she wanted him to be as present as possible, not performing ease in a public place. He was standing at the window when she arrived, the same window where the snow had been falling, where the city had looked like a dream of itself. And he turned when he heard her come in, and his face was tired. Not in the physical way, in the way of people who have been sitting with difficult things and not sleeping well. She thought, 4 days is a long time when you're not used to waiting. She thought, good. Not cruelly, not punishingly, but because the waiting had cost him something, and the cost of something was the only real measure of what it was worth. I have conditions, she said, sitting on the blue couch. He sat across from her. Tell me. I don't ask you for operational details, she said. I've made peace with the architecture of what you do, and I don't need the specifics. That's not me being naive. That's me drawing a line that protects both of us. She paused. But I need you to be honest with me about the things that affect me directly. My safety, the people around me, anything that would come to my door. Yes, he said. I need you not to make unilateral decisions about my life, she said. You can make suggestions. You can make strong cases. You can even tell me something is not negotiable when something genuinely isn't. But I need to be a participant in the choices, not a subject of them. Yes, he said again. And I need... She stopped. This last one was harder to say, because it was the most vulnerable, which made it the most necessary. I need you to understand that I am choosing you, actively, with information, with open eyes. Not because I don't see what you are, but because I see it and I'm here anyway. She looked at him directly. I need you to let that mean something to you instead of treating it as a problem to be managed. The silence that followed was complete and full. He looked at her across the space between them, and she saw, clearly, the man under the composure, the person that Julia had apparently been trying to locate for years with one simple question about happiness. It means everything, he said. His voice was very quiet and entirely stripped of its usual control. You mean everything. I don't know a better way to say it, and I've been trying to find one for 4 days. She breathed. Come here, she said. He crossed the room and sat beside her on the blue couch, and she put her hand in his, and they stayed like that for a long time, while the city went about its winter business outside the windows. He took her to meet Julia in February. Not in Rome. The timing was complicated by things Marco described with his characteristic oblique brevity, and instead, Julia came to New York for a long weekend in February, staying in the guest room of the penthouse that had gradually, over the course of 4 months, acquired Nadia's things in the ways rooms do when someone inhabits them. A book on the nightstand, a particular brand of tea in the kitchen cabinet, the blue winter coat on the hook by the door. Nadia Vitelli was 26, small, dark-haired, with Marco's eyes but none of his composure. Where he was still water, she was weather, expressive and immediate, speaking with her hands and her face and her entire body, saying whatever was occurring to her at the moment of occurrence, with the joyful lack of filter that apparently came with not having spent 2 decades in an empire of controlled information. She took one look at Nadia in the penthouse kitchen on Saturday morning while Marco was in the shower, and said, in accented but excellent English, "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Nadia said. "Something more." Julia made a gesture with her hands that encompassed both decoration and submission. The women before, they were, she seemed to search for the word. Polite. They were very polite. "I can be polite," Nadia said. Julia grinned. It transformed her face into something almost mischievous. "He told me you told him he was lying about his pain level in the hospital." "He was lying about his pain level." "He does not get told that he is lying," Julia said, "about anything." She sat on the counter with the ease of someone who had grown up treating kitchens as social spaces. "He texted me about that night, you know. After. He said she was not afraid." She said it in a Marco voice, low and deliberate, and it was accurate enough that Nadia almost laughed. He said it like it was extraordinary, like he had seen something he did not know existed. Nadia felt the warmth moving through her chest that she was used to feeling around him, but had not anticipated feeling about a story about him. "That's a lot." "He is a lot," Julia said. "He has always been a lot. He felt things very big when we were children, and he learned very early to put them somewhere they couldn't be seen. And the problem was that he was very good at learning that. So good that she paused. I worried, sometimes, that he had forgotten there was supposed to be something underneath." "There is," Nadia said. Julia looked at her. Then she smiled. Smaller, more real. The smile of someone who has been carrying something and set it down. "Yes," she said. "There is." A pause. "Take care of him." "He's not," Nadia started, the instinctive resistance of someone who knew the difference between a partner and a caretaker. "Not like that," Julia said. He does not need to be taken care of. I know. I mean," she thought for a moment, "keep telling him the truth, even when it is difficult. He has too many people who don't." Marco came into the kitchen then, looked at the two of them, and said with the exact tone of a man expecting the worst, "What were you talking about?" "You," Julia said, entirely without guilt. "Of course you were," he said. He looked at Nadia over his sister's head, and Nadia looked back, and the small private language that had grown up between them in 4 months communicated, in that look. She's wonderful on her end, and she's a catastrophe on his, and I love her completely on both. The weekend was the most purely enjoyable thing Nadia had experienced in recent memory. Julia dragged them to the Met on Saturday, and to a gallery in Chelsea on Sunday, and to a specific noodle place in the West Village that she had apparently been planning to visit for the entirety of the previous year. And through all of it, Marco watched the two of them with the expression of a man who has been given something he didn't think to ask for and doesn't quite know what to do with it, which was the most endearing thing Nadia had ever seen. On Sunday night, after Julia had gone to sleep and they were alone in the living room with the last of the wine, Marco said, quietly, "She likes you." "I like her," Nadia said. "I have rarely liked anyone as quickly." "She told me to let things be good," he said. He was looking at the dark windows and not at her, the way he did with the things that were most true. "She has been saying a version of that my whole life." A pause. "I'm beginning to believe she's right." Nadia leaned her head against his shoulder. His arm came around her. "She is right," Nadia said. "Yes," he said. "She usually is. I've stopped finding it irritating." Liar. A low laugh, real and warm and entirely his. Outside, the February city was cold and bright, and the lights were on in a million windows, and somewhere behind them, in the guest room, a woman who painted things slept the deep sleep of people who had decided to be happy. And beside her, on the couch, a man who had spent 18 years managing everything held the woman he had found in a trauma bay and let things, for once, simply be good. The thing about danger, Nadia had learned, was that it didn't always announce itself. In the ER, this was a clinical fact. People came in looking stable and crashed without warning. And the most critical skill was not the dramatic intervention, but the capacity to sense, before the monitors said so, that something was wrong. She felt it in March, at a dinner at a restaurant she'd never been to, seated across from a man named Vincent Ferraro, who was introduced as a business associate from the West Coast, and who smiled with all of his face except his eyes. They were four for dinner: Marco, herself, Ferraro, and a woman who was introduced as Ferraro's assistant, and who spent the dinner looking at her phone with the intense focus of someone performing indifference. Ferraro was smooth, very smooth. He talked about markets and real estate and a very good scotch they had apparently shared at some point in the past, with the fluency of someone who had spent years making men comfortable. He was charming in a completely calibrated way, each charm deployed with the precision of a professional tool. And he was interested in her in a way that was not personal. She understood this immediately, the way she understood things in the ER, by a quality of attention that was assessment rather than appreciation. He was cataloging her, measuring the nature of Marco's attachment to her, the specific weight of it, the way you measured a structural element before applying pressure. Marco knew it too. She could feel it in him, not in his face, not in his voice, which remained perfectly steady through the first course and the second, but in the stillness, the particular quality of control that cranked up one register when he was managing something. She ate her food and made pleasant conversation and let nothing of what she understood show on her face, which she thought was, in its way, the most useful thing she could do. In the car afterward, Marco was quiet. "He's going to make a play," he said eventually. "I know," she said. He looked at her. "You felt it." "He was measuring something," she said. "He wasn't interested in me. He was interested in what I represent, what I am to you." Marco was quiet for a moment. That was perceptive. "I read people for a living," she said. "I know the difference between someone who is genuinely engaged with you and someone who is watching your reactions." "What did you think he was measuring?" His voice was careful, precise. The same voice he used when he was taking in information that mattered. "Whether you could be pressured through me," she said. The silence that followed was the kind that confirmed. "He's a competitor," Marco said, "from Los Angeles. He wants access to the East Coast arrangement we have with the shipping companies. He's been making moves for 6 months. And he thinks I'm a lever." "He thinks you're a lever," Marco confirmed. She sat with this. The city moved outside the windows. They were heading north, toward the penthouse, through a Manhattan that looked the same as it always had, and contained, as it always had, things that were invisible to almost everyone in it. "What do you do about it?" she said. "I manage it," he said. "Marco," she turned to look at him. "I told you, with information, with openness, What does manage it mean? He looked at her for a moment. The discipline of choosing the right level of honesty. She could see him making the calculation. I make it clear to Ferraro that any attempt to use you as pressure would constitute an act that I would respond to with every resource I have, quickly and completely, he said, in language that Ferraro's world understands. A threat. A promise, he said. There's a difference in this context. And you've done this before, she said, made promises like this. Yes. And people believe you. Something shifted in his expression, not pride exactly. Something more like the particular gravity of someone who has bought a reputation with real cost and knows exactly what it's worth. Yes, he said. They believe me. She nodded slowly. She looked out the window. I don't want to be the reason things escalate, she said. If my being in your life creates vulnerabilities that... Stop. His voice was not harsh, but final. He reached out and took her hand, which he did rarely, with a deliberateness that made it register as clearly chosen every time. You are not a vulnerability. You are the thing I am protecting. Those are not the same thing. She looked at their joined hands. I know the difference, she said. So do I, he said. Finally. She understood that finally was doing substantial work in that sentence. The specific weight of someone who had arrived through a circuitous and possibly costly route at a clarity that had eluded him for a long time. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She leaned back against the seat. His hand stayed in hers. April was when it happened. She had been at the hospital. A Tuesday, a long shift, 2 critical cases back to back, and then a stretch of the particular grinding work that was less dramatic than television suggested and more exhausting. Paperwork, family members, the small, sustained attentiveness that no one saw and that was the actual fabric of care. She was tired in the specific, bone-deep way of the end of a long shift, her feet registering every step of the walk to the parking structure where Marco's driver, a new one named Paolo, was waiting. She didn't question the new driver. Paolo had been introduced 2 weeks ago, vetted, known to her. She got in the car. She was 3 blocks from the hospital when she understood something was wrong. Not from Paolo. He was fine, silent, professional, the car heading north as expected. From the second car, which she noticed in the window because she had been paying attention in the particular way that living alongside Marco had taught her, over months, to pay attention. The second car was following them, too precisely, through 2 turns. Paolo, she said. I see it, he said. Who is it? Don't know yet. He was on his phone, not texting, calling, one hand on the wheel, speaking in rapid Italian. She sat in the back of the car and breathed steadily and thought about her training, which was for bodies in crisis, not cars on Manhattan streets, and which was nonetheless something to hold on to. Breathe, assess, act. She called Marco. He picked up on the first ring, which meant he had been expecting a call, which meant he already knew. Are you in the car? He said. Yes, there's a second. I know. Paolo has a route. Stay in the car, stay low if he tells you to. I'm 10 minutes away. Who is it? A brief pause. Ferraro. I thought you... I underestimated his willingness to escalate, he said. His voice was the flattest she had ever heard it, stripped of everything except the functional, the operational. This was a mistake. I am correcting it. A pause, and then, cracking through the operational flatness, real and urgent. Are you afraid? Not if you're 10 minutes away, she said. She heard something in his end of the line, breathing, movement. 7 minutes, he said. Paolo will take you off the grid now. Trust him. The next 20 minutes were, she decided later that the word was cinematic in a way that felt deeply inappropriate. The car turning down streets she didn't know, the second car falling away after several minutes, Paolo navigating with the calm of someone who had done this before and would do it again. She sat in the back with her hands folded in her lap and breathed and did not allow herself to spiral, which required more effort than she wanted to admit. Marco was waiting when Paolo brought the car to a stop in the underground garage of a building she recognized. Not the Park Avenue office, not the penthouse, a third location, secure. He was already there, standing at the garage entrance, and the expression on his face when the car door opened was something she had never seen before in all the months of knowing him. Not the controlled composure, not the focused intensity. Raw, stripped, unedited. Relief crashing through everything like a wave through glass. He crossed the space in 3 steps and put his hands on both sides of her face and looked at her. Just looked, for a long moment, as though confirming something for himself that no one else's word could have confirmed. "You're all right," he said, not a question. "I'm fine," she said. And something happened to her voice, because his hands were on her face and his eyes were doing the thing they did when something mattered, and she had been sitting in the back of that car breathing carefully for 20 minutes, and she was fine, but her voice was not cooperating. "I'm fine, Marco." He pulled her in, his arms around her completely, and she let herself be held, which she was not always good at, in the particular way that people who have been competent and self-sufficient from an early age are sometimes not good at being held, but this was... She let it be what it was. "I'm ending this with Ferraro tonight," he said into her hair, "permanently." "What does... In a way that does not require you to have details," he said, "but permanently." She breathed against his shoulder. The garage was quiet around them, fluorescent and industrial and entirely unromantic. "I'm not leaving," she said. "I need you to know that. I was scared for about 4 minutes in the car, and I'm going to be very angry about this tomorrow. And I have conditions about how you deal with situations that affect me directly." "I know," he said, "but I am not leaving." "I know," he said again. His arms tightened. "I know." She tilted her head back to look at him. His face was close, his eyes searching. "Say it," she said. A pause, very brief. "I love you," he said. Quietly, completely, with none of the architecture of management or control, just the thing itself. "I've known it for months, and I didn't say it because I was..." He stopped. "I was afraid of what it would mean." "What does it mean?" she said softly. "That you are the most important thing," he said. "That everything else, all of it, is secondary." She reached up and put her hand against his jaw, rough with the late-hour stubble, warm under her palm. "I love you," she said. "For what it's worth, coming from someone who told you that you were lying about a 5 when it was probably an 8. He laughed, brief and real and completely unguarded, in the fluorescent garage, and she kissed him. The Ferraro situation ended in 3 days. She didn't ask for the specific mechanics. She had promised herself she wouldn't, but she noted, by the absence of a particular tension in Marco's shoulders, by the way Sarto looked at him with something that approximated professional satisfaction, and by a small mention in the business section of the Post about a West Coast investment group withdrawing from proposed East Coast expansion, that it was done. What remained in the aftermath was something she hadn't anticipated, a conversation she needed to have with herself. She had it over the course of several evenings, alone in the apartment first, then in sessions of quiet that she allowed herself at the penthouse while Marco worked, sitting with the truth of what her life had become and what she was choosing. Because it was choosing. Every morning was a choice. She understood this in the way she understood most important things, not through someone else's framework, but through her own, arrived at honestly. She chose to stay. She told Priya over the phone one night, Priya, who was the person she trusted most in the world, and who therefore deserved the full version, the honest version, not the sanitized one. "You're choosing to be with a man who runs an organization that operates outside the law," Priya said. Not judgment, assessment, the clinical voice Priya used when she was processing something difficult. "Yes. And the things he does..." "I don't have specifics," Nadia said. "I have outlines. And yes." Priya was quiet for a moment. "Are you happy?" "Yes," Nadia said. "That's the part I keep coming back to. Honestly, genuinely, terrifyingly happy." Terrifyingly. "Because it's the kind of happy that means something going wrong would matter enormously," Nadia said. "I haven't been this exposed in a very long time. Maybe ever." "That's how you know it's real," Priya said. "That's what I think." A pause. "He treats you well?" "He had my radiator fixed within 3 hours of me mentioning it to him." A pause. He also had a key made to my apartment without asking, which we addressed. And he listened, Nadia said. He changed. Not everything. I don't expect everything. But the things I asked for. He works at it every day. Priya made a sound that contained several things. Okay, she said finally. Okay, then I'm cautiously, carefully happy for you. Cautiously. He runs a criminal empire, Nadia. I know. Okay. A pause. Does he know how lucky he is? I'm working on making sure of it, Nadia said. She told Marco about the conversation, later, in the way she told him most things now, directly, without editing out the parts that were complicated. He listened with the full attention she had come to rely on. She called it a criminal empire, he said. She did. She's not inaccurate. No, Nadia agreed. She's not. She looked at him. It doesn't change anything for me. I wanted to say it plainly. You run something that other people would describe in those terms, and I'm choosing to be with you anyway. And I need you to understand that means I'm here with my eyes open, not in spite of understanding, but because of it. He reached across the space between them on the couch, took her hand. There is, he said, slowly, one other thing I've been meaning to tell you. That I've been holding, I suppose. She waited. I've been in conversation, he said, with certain people in the Department of Justice. She stared. You're not cooperating, he said immediately. Not an informant. Nothing so dramatic. But I have interests that overlap with interests they have, in ways that make conversation useful. He paused. I'm telling you this because I said I would tell you things that affect you directly, and this is part of a longer process that I've been considering for some time. A longer process toward, I don't want to spend the next 20 years in this specific shape, he said. I'm not naive enough to believe I can simply exit. It doesn't work like that. But there are ways of restructuring, of moving the weight of things over time, legitimizing what can be legitimized, stepping back from what can't. He looked at her. I've been thinking about it for longer than I've known you. You didn't cause it, but you clarified it. She sat with this for a long moment. Julia said you needed someone to tell you the truth, she said. She was right, he said, as usual. This is the truth? She searched his face. Not something you're saying. This is the truth, he said. It's slow, it's complicated. It may take years, but it is. The direction I'm moving. She turned his hand over in hers, looked at the tattoo on his wrist, the one she had noticed that first night, small and precise, that she now knew was the initial of his mother's name, Maria, in a particular old Calabrian script. Years, she said. Okay. Okay? I'm not going anywhere, she said. Years is fine. He looked at her with an expression that was almost wondering. I keep expecting you to leave, he said. Every time things become what they are. I keep expecting it. I know, she said. I can tell. She squeezed his hand. Stop expecting it. He kissed her temple, then her cheek, then the corner of her mouth in that deliberate way he had, the way that said, I am not in a hurry, and I want to be certain you know it. I'm trying, he said. Try harder, she said, and kissed him properly. Spring came to New York the way it always did, tentatively at first, then all at once, the trees on Park Avenue erupting into pale green, and the light changing from the flat gray of winter to something gold and soft, the city shaking itself awake in the particular way that made even people who had lived here for decades feel, briefly, that it was new. Nadia noticed it on her way to the hospital on an April Thursday, the light through the subway grate on 28th Street, and stopped for just a moment on the sidewalk to tilt her face up to it. She took a moment to be honest about it, profoundly, quietly, durably happy. The terrifying kind she described to Priya, the kind that meant exposure, that meant something mattering enough to be lost, that meant the specific vulnerability of having actually and fully a life she wanted to be living. The apartment was still hers. She had not given it up, which was a boundary Marco had registered without comment when she'd made it clear, and which she maintained because she understood the difference between sharing and dissolving, And because the blue couch and the color-organized books and the plants that were mostly not dying represented something specific about who she was that she wanted to preserve. She spent 3 or 4 nights a week at the penthouse, more on weekends, and in the meantime, the apartment remained hers. Her reading, her quiet mornings, her calls with her mother, her Sunday visits from Mr. Okonkwo with the jollof rice. Marco had eaten the jollof rice once, sitting at her kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon, and said that it was extraordinary, and Mr. Okonkwo had looked at him with the careful assessment of a man who took food seriously, and said, "You have good taste," with the gravity of a judgment rendered. And Nadia had stood in the doorway, thinking that this was the most absurd and perfect thing that had ever happened. She was thinking about this, about the Sunday and the rice and the expression on Marco's face, which had been one of those unguarded moments she collected, when she walked through the doors of the ER and Donna called out from the nurse's station without looking up, "Vasquez, welcome back. Trauma Bay 2 is ready." She stopped walking. "Donna," she said, "is there someone in Trauma Bay 2 right now?" Donna looked up, read her expression, and smiled the small smile of a woman who was deeply competent at her job and occasionally enjoyed being cryptic. "No one is in Trauma Bay 2 right now," she said. "I just wanted to see if you still went pale." "I don't go pale," Nadia said. "You went a little pale." "I categorically—" She walked past the station, resumed her pace. "It's the lighting in here." "Sure," Donna said. She checked on her patients, 4 across the evening, including a woman of 73 who had fallen on the subway stairs, and who Nadia spent 40 minutes with, not because the injuries required it, but because the woman was alone and frightened people needed someone to sit with them for 40 minutes. Because that was what you did. Because that was the actual work. Marco texted at 11. "How is your night?" She texted back, 73-year-old woman, subway fall. "She's okay, but scared. I've been sitting with her." A pause. Then, "That's why you're extraordinary." She sat in the hallway outside the bay and looked at the text and felt the warmth of it. Not the warmth of flattery, which she didn't trust, but the warmth of being seen by someone who was actually looking. "Don't oversell it," she texted back. "I'm just doing my job." "You're doing your job and also being the person you are," he wrote. "Those are not the same thing." She put the phone back in her pocket and went back to the woman in the bay, who had stopped looking frightened and started looking like someone who might want to talk, which was generally a good sign. Later, at the end of the shift, in the particular quiet of 5 in the morning, when the ER settled into its brief, almost stillness, she stood at the window of the break room with a coffee and looked at the city coming awake and thought about the trajectory of things. The night she had run into the hospital late and soaking wet, the curtain opening on a man who was large and bleeding and not afraid. The weeks after, the dinners, the snow, the conversation about conditions and choices and what it meant to see someone clearly and choose them anyway. She was not going to pretend it was without complication. The complications were present and would remain present, and she had made peace with that in the way she made peace with the parts of her work that couldn't be fixed, not by ignoring them, but by integrating them, by carrying the difficult alongside the good, and understanding that this was what a real life felt like. She thought about Marco, somewhere in the city, probably awake, probably working, probably thinking about her in whatever way he did, which she had come to understand as total and unwavering, and not something he broadcast, but something that was simply always there, the way gravity was always there, invisible, constant, and operating at every moment, whether or not you were aware of it. She thought, I would do it all again, even the car, even the garage with the fluorescent lights, even Ferraro, even the drawer I opened in January. She thought, I would do it all again, and I would keep doing it, and that is the only thing that matters. She finished her coffee and went back to work. The night everything came full circle was a Tuesday in May, almost exactly 7 months after the night she had run through the rain and found him bleeding on a gurney. She was on her way out of the hospital at 6:45 in the morning, walking through the lobby in the particular end-of-shift haze that was familiar and almost comforting, when she walked through the front doors and found him. Not in a car, not with Constantine or Paulo, just Marco himself, in the May morning, standing on the sidewalk outside Bellevue Hospital Center in a jacket and no tie, his hands in his pockets, looking at the building with an expression she needed a moment to understand. She stopped. He looked at her. "What are you doing here?" she said. "I was in the neighborhood," he said. "At 6:45 in the morning." It's a vibrant city at 6:45, he said. Many things are... Marco. He stopped performing easy. I come here sometimes, he said, quietly, as though confessing something. I don't always come inside. Sometimes I just... He looked at the building again, at the doors she had just come through. I stood out here, about a week after the hospital, before I had you found, before the car outside your building. I came here, and I stood where you work, and I tried to understand what had happened. What had happened, she echoed. Someone saved my life, he said. That's not unusual. I've been in situations where... He stopped. But it wasn't... He paused again, longer. She told me I was lying, about how much pain I was in. And she said it the way you say something to someone you are treating as a person, not a problem. Like she saw me and not the situation. He looked at her. No one does that. The morning moved around them. Taxis, the beginning of the hospital shift change, the city coming alive on a May Tuesday with the particular energy of spring and early light. I know, she said softly. I don't know how to properly explain what that was, he said, except that I've spent 7 months trying to, and the closest I've come is, it was the first time in a very long time that I felt like a person rather than a position. She walked to him, there on the sidewalk outside the hospital, in her scrubs with the overnight shift still on her skin, and she took his face in her hands the way he had held hers in the garage in April, and she looked at him. You are a person, she said. You have always been a person. The position is something you wear. He put his hands over hers. I'm going to need you to keep telling me that, he said. I intend to, she said, for a very long time. He leaned his forehead against hers. Around them, the city did its irreversible, indifferent, magnificent work of being New York, full of its violence and its beauty and its 8 million simultaneous human stories, including this one. A man and a woman on a sidewalk in the May morning, choosing each other in the plain and difficult and extraordinary way that people chose each other, with full information and open eyes. She kissed him there, in the morning, in front of the hospital where she had pulled a bullet out of his life and given it back to him. He kissed her back the way he did everything, completely, without reservation, with his whole attention. Later, in the car, heading uptown, the city bright with spring, he said, There's something I've been meaning to ask you. Ask. Julia is coming for the summer, he said. She wants to take a painting class in the city. She'll be staying... A pause. I told her she could stay at the penthouse. Nadia looked at him. You told her this without asking me? Yes, he said. I know. Marco. I know. He met her eyes. I'm asking now. She looked at him for a long moment. The car moved through the May morning. Yes, she said. Obviously, yes. Tell Julia I'm going to find her the best painting class in New York. The smile that came over his face was the unguarded one, the one she had decided she was going to spend a significant portion of her life producing. She'll insist on teaching you something, he said. Good, Nadia said. I have some things to learn. Not about nursing, he said. About color theory, apparently. She mentioned it twice in February. She will be relentless, he warned. So am I, she said. He laughed, low and real and warm, the laugh of a man who was not managing anything at this particular moment, who was simply in a car in the morning, next to a woman he loved, heading home. She leaned her head back against the seat and watched the city go by, the spring trees, the buildings in their morning light, the people moving through their lives with the particular energy of a Tuesday when the weather was finally good. All of it ordinary. All of it, for the first time in a very long time, exactly what she wanted. For the record, she said, to the window, to the city, to the man beside her. Yes? That night, when I told you that you were lying about your pain level. I remember, he said. I knew you were going to be trouble, she said. A pause, warm and deliberate. And yet, he said. And yet, she agreed. She took his hand in the morning light, and the city went about its endless, irreplaceable work of being alive, and neither of them let go. The restaurant finally had a sign. This was something she noticed. She was always noticing things. On the first anniversary of the night she had gotten into the black car outside her building. a small, dark panel beside the door on East 62nd Street, the name engraved in brass in a font so discreet it was almost a whisper. Vitelli. Nothing else. Just the name. She stood looking at it for a moment before the door opened, before the man in the very good suit held it for her, before she stepped inside to the warmth and the low music and the table in the back where Marco was waiting, standing as she arrived, as he always did. She kissed him first, before she sat, because she had decided early on that she was not going to be the kind of person who didn't do the things that mattered. "The sign," she said. "You noticed," he said. "I notice everything." "I know," he said. "It's one of my favorite things about you." The dinner was the same and entirely different. The same table, the same extraordinary wine, the same quality of deep attention from the man across from her, and also different, because a year was a real and significant thing, because she was different, because they were different, in the way that things changed by being cared for and worked on and chosen, over and over, in the ordinary days. She had news. She had been carrying it for 4 days, holding it in the same interior space where she kept the things that were true and not yet spoken. And she had decided. Tonight. "I've been offered a position," she said when the first course arrived, "at a new facility. It would be trauma coordination, building out protocols, overseeing the night shift teams. It's a step up. It's a significant step up." He looked at her with the focused attention. "Where?" "Private hospital, Midtown." She met his eyes. It was an interesting call. The funding structure of the hospital includes a significant endowment from a private investment group. A pause. "A group that I suspect, when I look at the documentation, will turn out to be connected to a man I know." He said nothing. "Marco." "I didn't arrange the job," he said. "I arranged for the right people to know you existed." "There is a difference. A meaningful one," he said. "They offered because you are the best trauma nurse at Bellevue, which is a publicly known fact among people who pay attention to those things." He met her eyes. "I only made sure the right people were paying attention." She sat with this. "I hate this," she said. "I know. It makes me feel managed." "I know," he said. "I'm sorry." She breathed out slowly. "It's a very good position," she said. "Yes," he said. "I was going to apply for it anyway," she said, "in another few months." "I know that too," he said. "I may have accelerated the timeline." She looked at him for a long moment. "We're going to talk about this," she said. "Yes, at length." "I expect so." "And then," she said, "I'm going to accept the position, because I earned it, and because I want it. And those two things are true, regardless of the timeline." Something moved in his expression. "Yes," he said, "they are." She picked up her wine. "You are impossible," she said. "You've mentioned that before." "I will mention it many more times." "I'm aware," he said. "I find, inexplicably, that I don't mind." She shook her head. But she was smiling. She could feel it, the specific warmth of it, the way it arrived without her calling for it because he was sitting across from her, and it was May, and the wine was perfect, and she was, against all reasonable expectation, in the life she was supposed to be living. "1 year," she said. "1 year," he confirmed. "The night you came into my trauma bay and told me your pain was a 4. 5, he said. I corrected it. It was an 8, she said. He smiled. "Perhaps." She leaned forward across the table, and he leaned toward her, and the restaurant with its small brass sign did its quiet and excellent work around them. "Here's to many more terrible patients," she said. "Only the one," he said. She touched her glass to his. "Only the one," she agreed. For every nurse who has ever held steady in the dark, and every dangerous man who was lucky enough to be held.